So time then for the press preview. It's our first look at what is on the front pages, and tonight we'll take a look at the headlines with Boris Johnson's former advisor, Kulveer Ranger, and the journalist and author Christina Patterson. Great to see you both. We'll speak in a moment. First of all, let's check out those front pages, shall we? Starting with the Sunday Times, reporting that the Prime Minister's former chief advisor, Dominic Cummings, is preparing a dossier of evidence that will try to blame Boris Johnson for the tens of thousands of deaths during the second wave of the pandemic. Well, it's the same story on the front of the Mail on Sunday. Number 10 rages at nasty sexist Cummings. The Telegraph says Number 10 fears Cummings' bombshell dossier. In the Observer, Johnson faces MPs' fury over Downing Street sleaze claims. Oops, the Star says the Prime Minister's credibility has been totally blown to shreds after his former advisor goes nuclear. The Sunday Mirror leads with concerns that Boris Johnson is risking national security by using an unsecure phone. The Sunday Express featured an exclusive on the front page about our return to normal life, saying the vaccination rollout will save us from another winter lockdown. And with that, we're joined tonight by Kulveer Ranger and Christina Patterson. Good to see you both. So, Dominic Cummings dominating the papers once again. Christina, I'm sure you've got something to say about all of this. Nuclear Dom, they're calling him. And the Sunday Times has this interesting take on the whole thing, that he's going to blame the Prime Minister for the COVID death toll. Apparently, he's got a huge dossier. He's been keeping all sorts of notes and he's ready to let rip.
Well, I don't think any of this looks particularly savoury to the British public, but I'm afraid this story is the most important of the whole lot, because the fact is that Boris Johnson is to blame for our enormous death toll. You could argue that in the first few weeks, anyone would have made mistakes. You could also argue that to miss 5 Cobra meetings looks, as Lady Bracknell might have said, rather careless. That's putting it lightly. But what we do know is that by September, actually, the scientists were strongly recommending a circuit breaker. And we know that Boris Johnson refused to do that. We also know that various libertarian scientists like Carl Genehan and Sunetra Gupta and Anders Tegnell were rallied to the cause by Rishi Sunak, who persuaded Boris Johnson, who already, as we know, has pretty libertarian instincts, in spite of having nearly died of COVID himself, to not have that circuit breaker and then to go ahead with Christmas plans, having said that it would be inhuman to cancel Christmas. So Boris Johnson is absolutely to blame for the 150,000 deaths, or at least a very high percentage of those deaths. And amidst all the rest of the accusations that Dominic Cummings has made about lack of ethics, lack of integrity, he's a fine person to speak, it has to be said. But I think this is vitally important because people have lost loved ones who did not need to die and would not have died if Boris Johnson had not made the decisions he made. So this is incredibly important. And the Sunday Times, in fact, did a superb investigation into this, a book called Failures of State, which I reviewed for the Sunday Times a few weeks ago. And it has a damning, an utterly damning account of the government's management of the polemic, overseen and responsible for, the responsibility being Boris Johnson's.
OK, so those are the charges outlaid in the Sunday Times. Kulveer, how worried will the Prime Minister be about all of this?
I may just correct that that's not all the charges laid out in the Sunday Times. That's probably Christina's charges on a lot of those factors. And to be honest, you know, this is an ex-advisor having a go about decisions that, when we look at the pandemic as a whole, I think if you go to the British people right now and say to them, how do you think this government and this Prime Minister has handled the pandemic? Yes, they'll identify problems. Yes, they'll say that there have been issues. And obviously, every death of the 127,000 or so has been a tragedy for those individuals and their families. But when we look at it in the global scale, and particularly when we see, and I know we'll talk about India later, but where other countries even closer to home, places like France, Germany have been saying, and their press have been saying they're envious of where the British people and the British government has got us in managing this pandemic under this Prime Minister and the decisions this government has taken. I think people will say there's a balanced view to be taken, but also...
Well, Kulveer, I'm just going to say, Kulveer, interesting you say that, because there is a poll out tonight, an opinion poll, which puts the Tories up to 11%, but it also says that 2 out of every 5 people think Boris Johnson is corrupt.
Well, I think there's a matter of timing here, and there's this impact of what seems to be hearsay, WhatsApp. There isn't any real evidence, and to be honest, look, I've worked with a lot of people in government. I still do. I see, and a lot of people agree, that our civil service and our government as a whole is probably the most ethical and of the highest standard globally in terms of how contracts are issued and the government works. So I know there's some stories at the moment about text messages, and there we talk about Sir James Dyson. You know, the Prime Minister being accused of inappropriate contact to a world-leading, renowned industrialist who, at a time of the need for this country and the people, was offering his services and wanted some help to get that done. Of course the Prime Minister will help. His first duty of care is to the British people and to do whatever he can to make sure he can help and protect British people. So, look, I think in the context, the British public will see this and say, this is not serious news about how the Prime Minister has handled the pandemic. And I think people have heard enough about Dominic Cummings and probably his behaviour previously, and they make up their own mind about how reliable a witness he is.
OK, Christina, front page of The Observer, Johnson faces MP's fury over Downing Street claims. Kulveer there saying this government is ethical and has high standards.
Well, I mean, I can only laugh. I mean, you know, you just can't take that view seriously, I'm afraid. In terms of the current management of the pandemic, I think compared to many European leaders, they got their act together. We've been in lockdown for months, which has had a very heavy toll, and not least by children. Many people are paying an extremely heavy price for it, but it was necessary because we went so late. We didn't have the circuit breaker, and we went so late into this in the autumn, and then the Kent variant was allowed to spread, and here we are. But no one can deny that the vaccine programme has been a huge success, and thank goodness for that. And the NHS has shown what it is, which is an amazing organisation that has incredible logistical abilities. And we also have Kate Bingham to thank for her superb work in, hedge betting and choosing some vaccines that have paid off, Moderna, Pfizer, and most of all AstraZeneca. So congratulations to all those people involved. And thank goodness it looks as though that is on the way to leading us out of this pandemic. But in terms of integrity, you have got to be joking. You have got to be joking. Everybody knows Boris Johnson was always known to be a liar. He's been sacked from several jobs for lying. He's a pathological liar. He consistently lies. Dominic Cummings knows he lies. I've no idea how truthful or reliable Dominic Cummings is. Clearly, he behaved appallingly last year, and his story about testing his eyesight and so on tested the credulity of, frankly, the most credulous person. So this does look like rats fighting in a sack. But when it comes to using taxpayers' money to renovate your personal flat, which seems to be one of the key accusations here,
well, the government says that the Prime Minister paid for it himself.
Well, we haven't yet had any evidence of that, but there was plenty of talk before about getting Tory donors to pay for this. And I would be very surprised if Dominic Cummings doesn't have some documented evidence to back up his claims on that. I think Number 10 is quaking in its boots now, and has good reason to, because I'm sure that Dominic Cummings has a lot of WhatsApp messages or text messages or whatever that will back up a fair degree of what he's said.
Yeah, he said as much, didn't he, in his 1,000-word blog. Kulveer, let's have a quick look at the front of the Mail. Number 10 rages at nasty sexist Cummings. They're saying that he's been briefing against Carrie Simons. I mean, Kulveer, where do you think all of this goes next? And why do you think the Prime Minister chose to pick a fight with Dominic Cummings, of all people?
Yeah, I would say, that the number 10 machine probably doesn't need to sink to the level of engaging in this conversation. I think, as we've been discussing, this is an individual who, for all his brilliance, and, he has some brilliance and some amazing capabilities, but operates in a way that isn't collegiate, isn't probably team-based. And these kinds of conversations and the kinds of conversations that he's having are not really at the front and centre of the minds of the British public. They're not what people are genuinely interested in. And there isn't any evidence about a lot of the sort of gossip about how was a flat paid for, even though number 10 have said the Prime Minister paid for this himself. We're talking about how the Prime Minister paid for the curtains when there are much more important things going on in this country, as we all know, and across the world, that the Prime Minister and the government have been dealing with and have got their entire focus on. And I think really, yes, this story is going to cause a storm at the moment in tomorrow's papers. But I don't think it's going to last. I don't think this particular story is going to last because I don't think there actually is the evidence. And I don't see why the Labour Party and Sir Keir Starmer are asking for an inquiry into these things. What are they actually asking an inquiry for? Who paid for number 10's curtains? Well, the Prime Minister said he will. I'm sure he'll provide the evidence that says he did. And really, is that what the leader of Her Majesty's opposition should be asking about when we are dealing with a global pandemic? And we really need to get the British people and the economy back on their feet.
Yeah, he says that sunlight is the best disinfectant, so we'll wait and see. We'll leave Dominic Cummings there. I know we could talk about this all evening, but we must leave it there because, meanwhile, India is setting another global record daily for COVID-19 infections. We're discussing that and plenty more after this short break. Do join us. Hello again, welcome back. Part 2 of the press preview with me, Boris Johnson's former advisor, Kulveer Ranger, and the journalist and author Christina Patterson. Kulveer, let's turn our attention to India then. Front page of the Sunday Times. I mean, we've been reporting from there all day today, and it is incredibly distressing, isn't it? Oxygen running out, people dying on the pavement outside hospitals. And as the Sunday Times reports, they're bracing themselves for 500,000 infections a day.
It's harrowing, and I'm sure we've all seen the pictures as well. And it just goes to show, if you don't get a grip of this pandemic, if the political structures, if the thinking, if the management isn't there, just what can happen. Now, India, obviously, a vast population, billion 4+ people. And I personally, I'm sure many people we're always worried about countries. And obviously, I have friends and family in India, but countries like India and their capability to be able to manage this COVID pandemic, especially if it got a grip. Now, it appeared in the first wave, India seemed to get through it, but I've also heard, the figures weren't quite accurate in terms of what happened in the first wave. Now, and actually having gone through that first wave, and I say this, having spoken to colleagues over the week in India, and I'd be asking them, what really is going on? And I had colleagues in Delhi who are saying there's panic. The hospitals just can't cope. The health system is collapsing, but other parts, Chennai, things a little bit under control. So vast country, huge issues. But I think what the real concern here is, what can the global community do? It was good to hear, I think, from the Prime Minister, but the government are looking to provide support, maybe even ventilators heading over to India. But I think this is where the next stage of this pandemic and management of it at a global scale is so important. How do we come together as an international community to help India, to help Brazil, to help Turkey, those countries who are finding it ever so hard, where they haven't maybe got the mature health systems and need that support, as well as putting pressure on their politicians locally to ensure that they are doing the right things. Because I do hear, unfortunately, things like the cost of medicine. If you know people and if you have the money, you potentially could get the things you need. But even that is now sort of running out, it appears, when the supply chains are just failing. Yeah. So a lot to be done.
Oxygen being bought on the black market, for 4 times what it would normally cost. Christina, I mean, it is incredibly depressing.
Well, it's utterly heartbreaking. But the thing that torments me, actually, is how populist leaders like Modi and like Bolsonaro can hold the lives of their people so cheap. I mean, we've known what this virus is. We know what it does. We know how contagious it is. We know that you have to have social distancing in order to control it. And what has Modi done? He has held mass rallies. He was boasting about the number of people. I think only about a week ago at one of his mass rallies, he has encouraged religious festivals, mass festivals to go ahead. Only a madman or a sociopath would do such a thing during a pandemic. And the same has been true for Bolsonaro, and the same was true for Donald Trump, who, thank goodness, is not in power anymore. So, of course, we should do what we can to help. And it is tragic that the healthcare system is not up to the challenge. But the reason the challenge exists is because a populist leader does not value the lives of the people he was elected to lead. And that is an absolute tragedy.
We've just got about a minute left, but I want to touch on this story as well, Kulveer. It's on the front of the Sunday Telegraph. Just talk us through this, if you would. Wipe non-crime hate allegations, says Home Secretary Priti Patel.
Well, I think this is an interesting and probably, something that a lot of people would welcome view, that if there are allegations about crimes against people and they're not proven to be hate crimes, that they shouldn't be held on the record against individuals, because we all know that, the stains that can be provided on people who are accused of things that then they weren't found guilty of. And I think this is another thing that the Home Secretary is looking closely at, because of the defamation, the issues that people have that impact on their lives and the impact on their families when they are accused of things inappropriately. Now, I've known people that this has happened to and seen the impact on their lives, and it's terrible. So, I'd welcome this review by the Home Secretary on this issue.
Quick thought from you, Christina?
Yeah, I think this may be the first time in my life I've actually agreed with Priti Patel. I think that I think that hate incidents, you have to define them very carefully, and there are things that you can say that might be classified as hate, or that some people think are hate, which are just a disagreement and a difference of opinion. And if you are found to have broken the law, that's one thing. But if you have been found not to have broken the law, I don't see why your reputation should be sullied or why that should stay on your record. So I agree with Priti Patel, and I don't know if I'll ever say those words again.
OK, Christina, Kulveer, thank you both.